Welcome to Advisory Design Panel this Thursday, November 21st, 2019. We'll start by acknowledging that this meeting is held on the Squamish Nation traditional territory. The first item would be adoption of this agenda. Someone to motion? Jenna? Second? Good. Thank you. The second item is the minutes from last meeting, which is October 31st. Do we have any comments? No, that's it. Thank you.
Just so I'm noted as absent when I was here.
I noticed that too.
Yeah,
actually.
and it says in number 2 that I seconded the agenda, so I was here.
Okay. Note that. Wonderful. Any other comments on our notes and whatnot? Okay, so we'll move to adopt those minutes. Someone want to? David? Second, Jenna? Thank you. I'm assuming we're all voting for, and that's adopted. Okay. Next, first item in business is DP number 513, which is 1089 Wilson Crescent. And we'll hand over to our proponents and planner.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Advisory Design Panel. My name is Fletcher. I'm a planner with the Community Planning Department here at the district. Today I'm introducing a project for a development permit application for a 10-unit townhouse development located at 1089 and 1095 Wilson Crescent. It is located in the Wilson Crescent Denville neighborhood and is subject to Development Permit Area 3. Those are universal guidelines. As well as the guidelines in the Wilson Crescent micro plan. So the Wilson Crescent neighborhood was subject to a micro neighborhood plan last year. It was adopted, and those guidelines have been included in your report package as Schedule B today. This project has not previously been presented to Advisory Design Panel. Staff are generally supportive of the site plan and specifically request ADP's recommendations on building form and character and landscaping as it pertains to DPA 3 and the Wilson Crescent micro plan. Staff are also seeking specific feedback on the proposed color scheme. Staff have noted throughout the guidelines, specific guidelines where ADP feedback is requested in Appendix A. And I'll hand it over now to the applicants.
Great, I'll take it. My name's Stefan Elmet. I'm a principal at Harborview. Thank you for your time. I too volunteer on the District of North Vancouver Design Panel, so I know what it's like to give up your time and for communities, and I think it's great. Thank you for allowing us to be here. Harborview has been active on the North Shore for approximately 20 years, and we've been recently in Squamish with our first completed project called Trails at 3rd in Maine, just a couple blocks from here, 8 units, and we're very happy to be involved with our next project in Squamish. We've got both our daughters, my business partner and I have both our daughters living in Squamish now in our new project, and we're excited about Wilson Crescent. Pleased to introduce Jane and Scott from AKA Architecture and Bill Harrison from Forma Landscape Design to present some of the details of the project. So thank you very much for having us.
Good afternoon, I'm Scott from AKA. We present Wilson Crescent Townhomes. They're a 10-unit townhome project in the Wilson Crescent neighborhood. We'll go through the site, some of the stats, general plans, and we'll review the elevations and the material quotes that we have, and then I'll be passing it off to Bill to talk about the landscape design. So Wilson Crescent is just north of the downtown core. It's defined there by the yellow dashed line that's hard to see from that distance. And our site is the little red box. There's several schools right nearby within walking distance, and we're walking distance as well to the Save On Foods and the Nesters at the main intersection of town. So just a few of the stats here for the site. We're RM1 zoning. The floor area ratio and lot coverage are maximized. Common usable space is met. And we also we've exceeded the private usable space requirements for each unit. All vehicle parking is established in the building and visitor parking at the rear of the site. And all bicycle parking is contained within the unit garages and also a smaller bike rack at the front of the property. Okay, so the proposed townhomes are split between two buildings that focus on a common lane. Individual stoops, landscaping, and patterned pavement are used to create a pedestrian-friendly environment, fostering interaction between neighbors. This interaction is further developed at the rear yard with the pump track and amenity areas. And at the front yard, we've reached out to the neighborhood by providing a small pocket park. There's a paved path for a future path through the neighborhood. And there's bench seating in there for opportunities to have interactions with the broader community. Our next slide here is just a shadow study diagram. Due to the north-south nature of the massing of the buildings, the effects on the neighboring properties are quite minimal. You'll have some overlap in the extremes during the equinox, and that's about it. For most of the day, the shade's contained to the actual site itself. So we'll go on to the plans here. We have 3 levels, 5 units in each building. At the main level here, we're in the flood zone, so we're contained to a garage and just the main entry area. The entry is off the common driveway. There's a small stoop with a bench and some landscape area. The garage is a double car garage, and we have about a 9-foot ceiling that tapers slightly as it goes to the rear of the garage. We have bike storage in the garage. There's also a little nook off to the one side behind the entry where people can have a workbench or extra storage. And this is also the access to the rear yard through the garage. At the rear of the building, you can see the communal garbage area that will serve the building. At level 2, we have the living functions, so living, dining, kitchen. The kitchen has a pantry off to the side and has views out to the common lane, so there's eyes on the street out there. There's also a small patio just off the kitchen that will provide another level of animation and interaction with the lane below. Off the living and dining, we have a large deck. So depending on which building you're in, you'll get a view of either side of the Squamish Valley. Some trees may affect your view off to the east a little bit, but there should be pocket views to the Cheek and Garibaldi. And there's also a small water closet at that level. Level 3 contains the sleeping quarters. So we have 2 bedrooms that share a master, or share a washroom off the main corridor. And then the master bedroom has a walk-in closet and an ensuite. There's also laundry facilities here and a small nook by the stairs there for a desk or extra storage. And again, here we have bedrooms on either side of the unit, so we'll have eyes looking out in the rear yard and on the common lane as well. So we'll move on to the roof here. The roof is just a series of simple gables, and that'll become more apparent when we look at the elevations next. So the 2 buildings we have are similar in design, but there's a subtle shift in color between a black and a gray color scheme, but they both share common colored elements. So this one here is building 1 to start with. So the overall treatment is minimal in nature, but we provide richness through the contrasting shiplap siding and use of textural elements. So we have shingles, smooth, hardy panels, and wood slat siding. There's a material box here that can get passed around. The building 1 black color scheme is on the left, and the gray color scheme is on the right. Which way you're looking at it? Yeah. And then,
These are quite heavy to pass around.
and then the overall character is added to and built off of with the playful nature of the gable roof on the long massing of the building. So yeah, building 1, when the box comes around, you see that it's a Shushugiban fiber cement shingle siding. And then at the windows, or in between windows, we have a black hardy shingle, or hardy panel. And then at little alcoves, like at the entry and the garage door, and up above at the balcony, we have the cedar shiplap siding to add some depth to the building. And then we've gone with a fairly bold color choice for the door. It's called salsa dancing. It's almost a terracotta look to it. So up here now is the back side of the building, and at the deck we have the same alcove setback with the cedar shiplap siding to provide some warmth for the building at that level when you're using the balcony. Towards the rear of the property, we've kept it fairly monochromatic, but I think with the garage or the garbage room and the services back there, there's a little play with the elevation to add some character. And with the activities that will be in the rear yard, it's going to basically play second fiddle to some extent. The next couple of slides just show the ultimate color scheme for building 2, which is great. And it shares all the same features, just in a gray tone. So we do have a couple of the shingles shown as a larger panel. So
We'll need you to step closer to the microphone,
Sorry.
please.
So we do have the shingles in a much larger format, so you can actually see what the texture is. It's not just the small little piece in there. So it'll have a rich texture to the building, and there's some subtle color changes. We have a slide here that shows a closer look at the main entry. So the first image there is of the doors that are facing Wilson Crescent to give a street presence. This isn't set back, so we've just used a wood slat siding to address the character there. And then at the typical units, you have the recess in the building. We'll have the shiplap siding, the salsa dancing door, and we have a side light and street numbering there. There's also a metal canopy, just a slim metal canopy that will be covering the doors and also just sort of highlighting the entries where they're set back. You can also see here the stoop with the wood slat seating and some landscaping placed around it. At this point, I will pass it over to Bill to talk a little bit more about the landscape design.
Thanks, Scott, Chairman, panel. Thanks for listening to us. My name is Bill Harrison, landscape architect with my company, Forma Design. And to segue from Scott, he touched on sort of the circulation of the site. One of the things I'd like to just touch on quickly is from the macro intention of what this site brings. This design here is an amalgamation of quite a few different designs that eventually got to this one. And I think there's been some really good moves made forward. It started out of, as Stefan was mentioning about his daughter and his partner's daughter, this initial came out of had a gal that would work for me that now has lived in Whistler for quite a while named Christy Volker. very talented designer, and also residents here with 2 little kids. So there was this story around, okay, if we could build something that we could, attract like-minded people to an area and do a micro kind of community, this was something that she was really interested in. So the first design went through a lot of that, and it was very intentional with basically around, the culture in Squamish for those younger families, and kids, and so we really wanted to accommodate that amount of interconnectedness, not only with the community, but also internally. So a lot of this has been driven out of that, and I think it's quite successful. Some of the comments back from the city were also very intentional, and I think some really good moves. For instance, the front 2 units that you see off of Wilson, their doors used to be internal, now they've been turned to face the street, and I think that's a very, it's a good move in that it kind of invites the street into the development before you even get there. The little parks outside have been redefined. We originally had urban agriculture out there, and we got kind of bashed on that one because of bears, and it's, so there's been a lot of different changes that have taken place, which I think has improved the project tremendously. Internally, we really wanted to celebrate the Muse down the middle, because that we felt was the one area that would create spontaneous interactions with the neighbors, opening the garages, working your bikes, working your cars, building stuff, being able to set up stuff all the way down the middle of the Muse, the vision being breaking bread with the whole community at times. So it's really a flex space as it terminates at the end with a built-in little deck that, sort of drag a barbecue out there, and possibly have a bike wash back there, and then you've got the pump track for the kids to play, and then all the way down the Muse. We've talked about putting a sliding gate at the front, but I don't know if that'll actually happen because of the fire. The other thing at the back, and as far as encouraging people to come outside wherever possible, we've done everything we can to encourage that, bring incentives to the site plan. The landscape, as a rule, is very, very simple. The pump track would be Alan Stepper, both big bikers and very good friends with Tom Pahaska, which is a very good friend who has volunteered to help with that. So the kids will have somewhere to really play, and it's built in. But it's also kind of sculptural too, so that's kind of cool. The hardscape is really very sustainable. Form follows function with big timbers. We are in Squamish. The paving is a very simple pattern with asphalt, so it's not expensive and monochromatic. It can all flow and drain to the middle. Softscape, it's a very, very simple plant palette. The idea being as maintenance-free as possible, creating a little bit of semi-private outdoor living space at the back, if you want to go to the next slide, Scott. That people can, adapt as they see. There's no fences, there's just hedging. It's very simple, once again, because it flows through from the garages, which is nice. I don't really know if there's anything else to really... Economically, we've been very conscious of it being, in a market that is affordable. So it's not elaborate, but that doesn't mean it's not really elegant, and I think it'll work really, really well. And we paid attention to drainage because from a civil standpoint, this is in the floodplain, so we don't have a lot of room to move as far as the slopes and things go, but it has been done, and it has been looked at thoroughly by the civils, so Benny has worked on that, so that's good. I think that's about it. I answer questions. Also, too, I got full set plans of plans for work. I just want to have a look at a bigger set of plans. Up to you guys. If you want to, that's fine too. Thank you.
Anything else?
No, that's it.
Okay, thanks very much. Right. We'll start with some questions. Ready to go?
My first, okay. Thank you for your presentation. Just a couple of quick questions. What's the width of the Muse travel lane? Is it like your standard 6.5 meters strata road?
Yeah, it's 6.5 just to the face of the stoops, the stair.
Right.
And then you have another foot or so for the face of the building.
Okay. And then I guess there's a comment from the district here on covered outdoor space. I kind of get why you wouldn't do it on the second floor, but was there any exploration of larger patios that would provide more cover space underneath on the ground floor?
Well, at the views, there's just no room to accomplish this. We do have it's about a 3.5-foot setback into the building there, so there's some covered space.
Right.
And in the rear yard as well, we were crossing over the setback. So,
Gotcha. So you're at your setback. Okay. And I guess, are there any stormwater features on site that we should be made aware of?
No,
Okay.
not that are celebrated
No.
externally.
I guess my last one is the decision, like, is there a reason why you went with the two-tone for the buildings? Was that your first choice?
well, we played around with lots of options. I think we kind of felt one color was a little too stark, so we just made a subtle shift there just to have some variety and sort of have a distinction between either building as well. So especially when you're facing it from the street, you're not looking at two black houses, you're looking at two distinct houses.
Okay, that's all for me.
Cool. Quick question for the planner. Are all these adjacent lots zoned RM1?
Yes. Yeah, the majority of the Wilson Crescent neighborhood is zoned RM1 or RM2. One lot is RM3.
For the applicant, have you considered lighting?
Yeah, so lightings, we have soffit lighting at the garage opening and above each entry point.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's some downlighting at the garage room, the garbage room, and at all the service locations, so the electrical closets at the back and the mechanical rooms at the units off the street there. We haven't really considered it.
But there will be power source at where the seating area is at the very
Yeah, so yeah, where the seating.
westerly end of the site.
There'll be some lighting treatment back there. Yeah, we don't have a full lighting plan for the site just yet.
And is there development signage or is it just no? And then the balcony on the off the kitchen.
Yeah.
Can you explain what that would be used for, or?
It can be used for a parent yelling at their child to come in for dinner.
Only
or
one
if someone's out front working on a car in a garage and they have a friend across the way, they can have a chat.
That was an added feature.
Yeah.
To have eyes on the street, or eyes on the music.
And is there an architectural reason for that little offset with the pantry and why that crosses the dividing line between the apartments?
Well, just the inset space. I think it was just to give a little. Just to give a little depth to the face.
It actually lines up with something on the facade. So
Okay.
we can carry that same material straight down rather than darken it.
So many questions.
In terms of color, it's very dark, very heavy in gray and black. Are other colors being considered? Because it is quite heavy in that sense. And given the tightness of that corner on Wilson Crescent,
Yeah.
to open up the space and give it more light. And it goes along with the lighting question.
Yeah, there's been some consideration to it, but we really feel just the color variation in the shingles themselves, where there's not solid color to them. There's some lightness that shows through, so we feel that they'll stand out a little bit.
Maybe I'll answer this a little bit. So one of the strategies that we had for this project, we really wanted to focus all the animation and the visual dynamics at the street level. So, we put all that warmth and the materials and the texture to complement the landscape, kind of everything at the ground level where human contact is possible. So the upper levels are meant to be a bit understated and kind of to fade a little bit. Where you are able to exit the building, that's where we put all the wood features so that, at the human experience, when you're outside of your unit, you're still experiencing that wood, and everything else is sort of meant to work together to create more of a neighborhood feel rather than a unit-to-unit type of differentiation.
And the juxtaposition too of the color of the buildings from an architectural standpoint with the big sky that we find ourselves. My house is black, or very deep charcoal, and the richness of that contrast is actually very striking, very simple, very clean. So it's not dark at all, actually.
Fair, but if it's a solid line of two black and gray
Well, they got the
versus individual houses, like you live in an individual house versus townhouses. So this is solid lines of black. So even if it's high and it's away from the streetscape, you're still looking up, and that sort of imposingness of the black. Scott wondered if you had considered something lighter, or an interspersing of lighter.
Well,
At that level.
we sort of liked the idea or the concept that the buildings are animated by the people themselves. So when they're exiting the building in those outdoor areas, that's where we see the emphasis and a little bit less on architectural features. So that we do feel that by using the hardy shingle, that there's quite a bit of texture still. And some faithfulness in terms of how the light will affect it through the day. But yes, we did make a deliberate effort to make the facades quite minimalist, understated.
Just question to staff. Has this been considered in the context of the whole, I think there was a Wilson Crescent sub-plan, some area plan? Has this, the color scheme and the traffic flow and all of that been considered in that plan?
It has been considered evaluated against the plan, and in the back of your report package, you'll see the guidelines there, and so it's dealing with all the guidelines of the plan.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Priya and Scott. I just wondered if you had any try to have more attention to the, except for the entry door for one of the units to street. Did you try to make the building looking more to the street because you don't have spatial separation? Maybe you could have more window. Did you try to have it more toward the street rather than for the first two corner units?
Well, again, the emphasis was to try to create more of a neighborhood context here, so we're really trying to use that driveway to create connections between the two buildings. Same type of thing. We are addressing this street mostly through landscaping. Bill added the walkways to the street, and we thought the connections actually happen more through the pedestrian activity and that kind of access. So we're using the same logic that we did on the other sides, where the upper levels are meant to be a little understated, and that the emphasis is on the front doors and on the wood features at the ground level.
So pedestrian access mostly throughout the middle part, which actually is a vehicle access too.
Yeah.
Right.
There's also two for things. There is that physical connection of the two front units to the street.
Yeah, just two doors.
Just
yeah.
the two, yeah.
Just two doors, but nothing else.
Yeah, they're not stepping out, so you see, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, you don't see that it's, and any variation, did you try any variation, elevations, back and forth, or it's just one block?
It's just a very tight site. We're tight up against the setback on either side, so we're kind
So you
of
had
limited to
maximize
what we can do there. Yeah.
And did you try to have the access to the backyard more direct to the access that you have in the entry rather than offset in the garage?
Oh, for the specific
Well,
door out to
all
the
the
back.
units you have to go past the car and then go to the backyard rather than straight out.
Yeah, I think we moved the door off to the side to give a little more floor space to the little storage nook that's just outside the stair there.
So that's the storage?
Yeah, or just a workspace.
I see.
Yes, we did have earlier versions where that was a direct access from the stairwell out to the backyard, but we modified that because it was thought that this little alcove space in the garage would be a useful workshop for people who work on their bikes or their projects.
And do you think that will be okay when the car is actually parked there? Do you have enough access to get to the backyard?
I think so. The garage is quite deep. The dash lines in the garage there show a full-size parking stall, so it's
Okay.
about another 3 or 4 feet there.
What is the size of this small balcony next to the kitchen? the depth, and it's less than 2 feet, right?
I think it was,
Seems to be because it's 2.9
yeah, it's,
between two brick lines, so it should be
yeah,
right. So
it's close to 3 feet, and then,
but by the time you have
probably,
2
That's
feet.
6 feet
yeah,
wide.
2.5 maybe.
And the next thing, it's not really that important, but do you have the wall next to the staircase or railing?
Oh.
It looks like a wall.
I think it's shown as a wall right now, but
It's not a
the
wall.
interior plan is still.
And the other balcony, do you know roughly how big is that one? Then the other side.
Oh, I can't remember, but
Just roughly, it seems like,
7.5 foot deep, I
uh-huh,
think.
okay, that's good enough. And what's the material in the garbage enclosure? The roof?
the roof?
Mm.
The intent is just to use a torch-on membrane at that roof.
Just total. You didn't have any possibility of using it as an access as a deck for the next unit?
We did talk about it, but we didn't add that as a feature at this point.
Right. And what do you think about snow on this type of roof?
Yeah, it will get built up in the crickets.
I mean, we have valleys, right?
Yeah.
This is a pitch of 412, so anything,
It's
Is it 412
7
or-
to 12 actually.
what is it?
Yeah, but then in the middle you have a valley. How
Yeah.
does it drain?
So at the valleys, there'll be crickets, so
And what material?
the material, usually the crickets are torch on, it's a lower
Yeah,
slope.
but how high do you want to come up? When you have the snow accumulation, you have about, I would say, 4 or 5 feet at the corner, at the valley. How do you want to put that?
Well, we'll just have to have the asphalt torch-on come up high
All
enough
the
as we think. And then I think the strata would have to, if there was a heavy snowfall, we'd have to implement a slope
Okay.
bearing strategy.
Right. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Hi, thanks for your presentation. I have just a couple of questions. One is, of course, the regarding the parking. Can you just explain, are these supposed to be community garden beds that are adjacent to the parking, or are they just pavers, these white?
Oh, this is all, those were added, right? These
Yeah.
areas here for, it's just paving.
Okay, just
Yeah, it's just paving. There's some real tightness in here as far as for the fire truck goes and stuff. So
Okay.
it was, but we're hoping to put in a bike wash area. Okay.
Okay, and then can you just explain the sort of rationale of why at the back of the building is facing the little park? Over the electrical, you have a flat roof, and the other one is slightly angled. Have you thought about having them on both angles or both that?
I think it was just the garbage room is a much bigger space, and if we angled it similarly to the electrical room, it looked kind of odd at the end of the building, kind of looked like a shed.
Okay.
So, and the same effect with the way the roof slope now, a larger pitch kind of looked a little odd. So they're just two different types.
Okay. Can you tell me just what the dimensions are of the water closet on the
Yeah, it's probably about 7 by 4.
that's all I have.
Thanks for your presentation. I'm curious where the fences are. You have a fence detail, but you also spoke of there not being any fences. Is it just the sculptural area right there? Is that just?
No, it's a perimeter.
Oh, the whole perimeter?
Yeah, it has to be, yeah.
Okay.
But there's no fences that go from sort of the dividing point between the units.
Between
It's
units.
just- It's just a small hedge.
Okay, great. The Muse area, are you proposing pavers in asphalt, or are you doing
No.
colored asphalt for all of it?
Scored and colored, or possibly even, the paint on, possibly, but it's a little expensive, but it sure looks nice,
Yeah.
so we'll see.
Okay. The planting that's proposed at the entries, are those beds or are they meant to be containers?
Yeah, it has changed.
I'm just curious if the intent there is that these are planted and maintained by the owners of the units, or is this sort of a globally maintained?
Are you talking at like right at the entries on the Muse?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be planted. It's a very good comment. It's shown right now to be planted at grade, but they could be raised. The main concern I have there is snow
Yeah.
and snow clearing.
Right.
So there is a possibility that they could be raised,
Yeah.
into a planter, so long as it's bulletproof,
Yes.
right?
And irrigated.
And irrigated,
Yeah.
exactly. So, but I think it's important that there's at least a little bit of green there,
Mhm.
some softening,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah. But that's always the trickiest.
No, I hear you.
Yeah. And then the other question I have is you have, so on the site plan, it looks like there are a number of circular berms that are proposed.
Yeah.
And then, but I wasn't quite sure that was translating on the planting plan. Do you intend to make berms, especially?
Yep.
I can see that you're making these back here, but the ones along the street, are you
No,
raising?
yeah, well, possibly one on the top side, but not necessarily on the call it the south side.
Yeah, okay.
But on the north side, just to give some, some separation there, and then, because now we've got a door coming in.
Right.
So the idea was that there's sort of a little node on both sides now, so that was in response to the city's comments and making the street more accessible and
Inviting.
more inviting, and once again, that's those spontaneous connections. But there's also some berming at the back, which will be incorporated with the rocks and sort of the up and down of the pump track.
Pump track,
So it
yeah.
can be quite fun, actually.
Yeah, okay. Those are all my questions. Thanks.
Thanks for your presentation. Rain gardens, you spoke about being in the floodplain and the complexity of that. Is rain gardens in this area not achievable because of the floodplain limitations?
Anything's possible, but it's a fairly serious situation with the river right there and how this all works. So we really limited in what we could do. So there wasn't any encouragement to actually cut into that at all. As a matter of fact, stay above it. So
Could you speak a bit to the trees that are existing on the site?
pretty much the existing trees that are there will go. There's not a lot of room to retain them. There are quite a few trees that are off-site this way
Yeah.
that obviously will be saved.
But currently are they mostly alders, or is there kind of specimen trees that have to be taken?
I think there's some fairly large, if I remember correctly, it's hard to tell because of the way the site is currently occupied. But there are some large firs in the backside here. Will they stay? I don't know, as this whole area develops. Potentially not.
Those are offsite, the
Yes.
first. Okay. Everyone else has their questions. Thank you.
Great, thanks for the presentation. Just some quick questions about staff's comments about color and variation. So you already partly answered it about your use of wood, pedestrian scale, and around the entrances. I'm just wondering why you didn't carry that to the side yard, the rear of the building.
You mean the wood tones?
Yeah, the wood tune. I mean, if I look at the yard and where the private space is and in relation to the existing or the internal condition, it's quite an intense black facade. The interior is kind of a nice mix, but it's quite black on either side, on the side yards.
Right, we just generally find, because we've done a number of townhome projects in Squamish, that what ends up happening is that the driveways become, or the strata driveways become that main area where people gather. And that even if there is a backyard at the grade level, that those actually don't get used very much, because people tend to use their upper level decks more so, because that's kind of directly off their living space. So we just felt that there is some backyard features back there, but we wanted to draw most people to that driveway area. So we did think about, we've had options where we had carried some wood maybe below the deck area in the backyard. But it's one of those things we go back and forth on because it doesn't fit, it didn't fit the kind of design concept that we had for drawing people to what we anticipated to be the most used areas that would be identified in wood. So,
okay.
but it is a fine balance. It does take a little bit of courage to be so simple. So we are definitely testing that out. And we also thought that there is a play between the architecture and the landscape, and we really felt that with Bill's design that had the opportunity to be the feature that created character at that level.
Okay, thanks. And just one other quick question just about the form. You've kind of sculpted away at the garage door and the windows. I'm just wondering about projections or horizontal elements, if that was a consideration, just thinking about weather screening, rain proofing, everything we need in this climate. If that was a constraint of the site or?
Are you talking about
eaves?
Roof eaves? Yeah.
Well, I think we just building the design, the idea of eaves didn't really fit with the simplistic form we were going for in the massing.
Sorry, let me interrupt for a second. But that is part of the reason why we wanted to use the hardy shingle, because this is a product that requires very little maintenance and is quite durable over time. So where we use the wood also works more technically because it's in all those protected alcove and soffit areas. So that's sort of the logic that we use to kind of have a balance of sort of the minimalist appearance that we wanted, but also the responsible durability that we want to have for the project. So we have used hardy shingle on a number of work over the years, and it does hold up quite well under the elements.
Okay, great, thanks, that's my questions.
Thanks. My question actually would go to Jesse. And this is regarding the location of the garbage shed. And it's a question of practicality and perhaps a standard for the neighborhood. Has it been sort of looked at to have it at the front rather than have the garbage truck back all the way down through all the houses to get to the garbage, the back of the property? I know there's an aesthetic consideration on the front and the street side, and there's probably even a regulation concerning this. But would it not make more sense for it to be practically at the front for safety and everything else?
I do believe you suggested that it was an option to go to the front, but they chose to put it in the back.
Okay.
And we don't have a regulation that says it needs to go in the front or the back, but we do have regulations against accessory buildings in the front. So if it would still need to be attached to the building, but I think it's a trade-off. I think that, yeah, it shows it can go in one direction.
So my thought is that if there's a standard in the sub area in the neighborhood, that they're all at the front, and this is something that GFL can work with more harmoniously in their rounds every week, or because we do tend to have a lot more sort of. It's not just one garbage pickup anymore. It's recycling. It's all kinds of other things, and there's going to be a lot of, I don't know. Should be a little bit more focused, I think, to the practicality of the ins and outs and how this works in these types of designed neighborhoods, assuming that all of these properties will probably be developed the same way. So if you think of time and money spent with the garbage truck going and backing down each and every one. But I think it's a bigger sort of planning question rather than just one proponent perhaps. So that's what I'm asking.
No, in terms of waste room, right now our big focus has been just getting new townhouse developments to build waste rooms. So right now they cancel off to do code pickup, which we're not supportive of, for airware reasons, especially in this neighborhood, which has a lot of air conflict. So achieving this is quite an accomplishment, I think, from a planning perspective. And then with that, we are looking for waste room guidelines and setting into consideration, but that'll also need to be reflected in the zoning bylaw update in terms of where you can situate accessory buildings. So
Yeah.
it's an ongoing conversation.
Yeah, something to consider anyway, but I
Yeah, if I
applaud
can
that you're
speak to it a
building
little
one
bit,
for us, but.
We are looking at turning radius of the GFL trucks and trying to provide enough park space at the back of the property there so they can come in and turn around and not have to back up through the whole drive.
You can get a garbage truck to turn around in that?
We're still just fine tuning it a little bit, but it's tight.
Anyway, you've considered it though, and obviously it's a possibility, but it's got to work hand in hand with planning's notion of what should be happening there. So that's all I have for questions. Anyone else?
Yeah, sorry, just have one follow-up question. To Jesse, in terms of the neighborhood plan, am I correct that there is the two lots to the east of this are being planned for multi-use apartment buildings that are approximately 6 stories high or 5 stories high?
To the 11, oh gosh. There's a rezoning that's proposed further east along for a 4-story apartment building.
Oh, okay, I just thought it was right next to it in terms of shadow.
Not
Okay.
adjacent, no, it's a few lots down.
Okay,
I can't remember the address on here.
thank you. Just didn't need that first one.
Thanks. Okay, well, we'll move on to comments at this point. Carlos?
Sure. I guess just picking up on the garbage comment, I might encourage you, and it's something that I know that we're looking at with some of our projects, is the I think it's Rotolock system, like the buried garbage system there in Europe. It's something that would be a conversation with GFL to adopt that in the district, but it would eliminate the need for the room and still be bear-proof and child-proof and all the rest of it. Just something to consider.
Can you explain it a bit more?
You see all over Europe, they're basically buried garbage containers, and the garbage truck has to get basically a little crane arm, and it picks the crane arm up, and then someone comes and unzips the bottom bag, and all the garbage goes into the system. They're apparently better for smell, they're better for bears, they can hold more, so you have less frequent garbage pickups. It's a little out there, but I'll just float that one because I know it's something that.
What's the code?
I think it's Rotolock, or I might be wrong with that one. I'll confirm that. I just need to look at my phone. I don't want to be rude. So leave that one out there, hanging in the air. I'll say, just based on the comments that the district's looking for, I quite like this building form and style, so I'm okay with the fact that it does not stagger. I'm very much okay with the color scheme. In fact, if you had presented it all being the black for both buildings, I wouldn't have a problem with it. I think it's going to age a lot better than a lot of other townhomes. If I was the neighbor, I much prefer to look at a black structure than the gray and the beige that you see everywhere else. That's just my thought. I think your approach is sound, like there is warmth in the wood that's brought into the design, so I would strongly support that. There's not much more to comment on from the district, sorry. The fact that it doesn't step back, I also don't have a problem with that. I know that's part of the guidelines. I think in a 3-story building form, I'm okay with it having a vertical face. But as you grow higher, I can see the rationale behind that. that's really it for me.
Okay, I'm an architect, so I love black. So this is really hard for me to say, but I just think the black is just overused ever so slightly here. And I actually really like the gray. And then, you know, there's just, even in the precedence image, there's some really nice images there of like a rusted red metal or a brown or a green or a blue, and it doesn't have to be the beiges and the really cheap looking hardy that we're kind of used to on some. It could be just another color that's not intense black. And I appreciate that there is some patina in that, but especially the rear elevation, which other people have talked about. I mean, it's really austere back there with the heat islands in it there. You wouldn't be able to sit near the building, I don't think, on a 30-degree day. But so it's hard for me to say, but maybe a bit too much black. The balconies, I think the balcony looking out is great. I'd maybe just think about the possibility of doing an overhang, just so you overhang that last little 2 foot, because it seems a bit annoying that, you know, we've got this beautiful balcony, but the last 2 foot will always get rained on and there might be some splash, so maybe there could be a little overhang just to keep the whole balcony. And then the smaller one looking into the roadway, I just think I appreciate that what it does is it creates the modulation and lines up, but it's kind of a little bit small. I don't think I could put a lamp pot out there. The balconies, and then the traffic calming. So my personal opinion is I don't believe that it's necessarily traffic calming, the sort of patterns. I think it's still very car centric, and again, just looking at the precedence images, I see that there's like at least a demarcated path along the front of the buildings, which I feel is where most people may walk. And so I'm not suggesting a raised walkway or a sidewalk, but maybe that the color of the asphalt is a consistent color along by the side, maybe just to ground the buildings and to provide like a little marked out pathway, because I don't know if I was visiting my friend at the end one where I would track to. But otherwise, other than that, you know, I really appreciate the sort of bold form, and I think it's going to look really great development.
Thank you. I echo David's comment, and to that staff is seeking input on the color. I love black, it's very elegant. But given the closeness, particularly in backyards, people will go to that backyard if it's lighter and if it's not boiling hot back there, they will tend to migrate back. And I live in a similar sort of neighborhood, and people might sort of hanging out on the roadway, the alleyway, the mews, has become a challenge for cars moving in and safety for young children. So they've now started moving to their backyards and a play area that's going to be built. So be aware of that, and also the garbage truck backing down the back, they will not be able to turn around unless you have a huge space there, because ours backs in and has almost hit children. So be aware of that safety, just in that mindset. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. I wish there was more attention to the street elevation, which is missing. Colors, sort of, I wish maybe a lighter color, because of the distance between the two blocks, maybe a bit overwhelming, but maybe okay, I'm not so keen about that. Deck into the setback, I have no problem with it. I think it's a wonderful idea. The bigger the deck, it acts as an overhang, covers the building. I think it's wonderful variance, no problem to me. If I could, I would have tried to see what mentioned about the garbage enclosure. Maybe we could put it in front, but make it more interesting, but push the blocks a bit further back. I don't know, it needs to be considered, but the point regarding the traffic and this garbage truck is a valid point. So I don't know how it may be addressed, but maybe not. Anyway, I think it's a good project based on the size of this lot.
Oh, sorry. Overall, I like the simple form. I like the black. I mean, though it is a lot of black, I still think that it's a neutral, natural kind of color. I would echo what everybody else has said about the garbage truck backing up. I wouldn't really like to see the garbage at the front, but just from a safety standpoint, I think that there are some concerns there. I really like the playfulness of the driveway aisle. I think it's fantastic, and given that it is only 10 units, hopefully there's not going to, the traffic going in and out of the site is not going to cause any conflicts. I would encourage you to put a pocket door on the powder room on the main floor, just to, just got a walker case for maneuverability in there. And otherwise I think it's great. I really like it.
I too really like the project. I think it fits the site really well, and I like the simplicity of the built form. I'm intrigued by the colors. I like it. I can see the point though of it maybe being a bit black, but it isn't a very high development, so it doesn't feel too imposing to me. Initially when I looked at the plan, I felt like there was a little too much hardscaping. I understand the idea of the muse, and I like that. But I do see the potential for, some conflict with garbage trucks and kids and cars, and with the planting out front, and having to plow in and out of all of that might be a bit challenging. So I think some thought really needs to go into how those areas are planted and maintained over time. Who's responsible for them and how they're irrigated? I think that could use a bit of thought. The other thing is, in terms of traffic calming, I think it does work to some degree to have patterning, but maybe there's a way to actually pinch with plant material a little more right at the entry, almost by creating some kind of a sense of entry, maybe with 2 larger shade trees or something that are kind of pinching that front to encourage people to slow down. That might not work with a garbage truck though, or a fire truck, so you never know. The other thing, colored asphalt or colored concrete and snow plows are usually a bad mix. It's very hard to fix those once the patterns get chipped, and there's some damage to it. So I'm not sure what the solution is there, but I do like that there's some patterning in the hardscape. I like the simple planting plan, and the berms and the undulation, especially since you have the pump track in the back, and echoing a little bit of that on the street would be nice. Sort of a little tester for what is in the back of the site. I did have a comment about the fence. So if the fence is around the entire perimeter, the fence design to me is a very kind of traditional fence. And I wonder if, a more contemporary looking fence might be more appropriate for this project. So you might want to consider that. I think, and I'm supportive of the variance for the balconies in the rear. I think that makes perfect sense. And I think that's it.
Good. So color and massing, I think overall I'm supportive of it. I do echo some of David's concerns about the amount of black, and I would encourage some consideration in the backyards of what that experience would be in the summertime against the black. I think there would be value in considering how the trees and the size of the trees and the layout of the trees can help maybe break up the amount of black and alleviate some of the concerns. A lot of the trees specified are quite small, and maybe with consideration to larger species that would provide more shade and then also help create a nice balanced relationship with the building could be a nice approach. With regards to the trees, I definitely would encourage everyone to have a clear understanding of what's existing today, just so that we know that the balance is being accommodated for what's. It looks like there's a lot of trees that are being planted, but we just want to make sure we're, keeping track of that. With the rain gardens, I think if it's achievable, it would be really interesting, and it'd be very good for the kids of this neighborhood to see the water coming out of the building and spilling into a rain garden, and understanding the importance of that. I completely appreciate that it may be out of the opportunities of this project because of the floodplain, but it's possible. I think the painted muse is a really great way to leverage multiple uses for the space. I would encourage a pattern that really celebrates the architectural expression and maybe encourages whoever is driving in that space that it's very clear that this is a multi-use space. There are children at play, etc. It could be done in a very cool, modern way, but still enough that graphic cues that there's those families in there, which would be really fun. I really like the shared backspace. I think that's great. If it's possible to have a barbecue there permanently, that would be, I think, a really great community hub opportunity. And I definitely thumbs up on the bike wash if that's something that can get tucked in. It would be a huge amenity for the people. And I do echo the comment regarding the fencing. It would be great to see the two coincide in relationship. Overall, really great.
Great, thanks. Overall, I think it's a nice project. It's elegant and modern, and I appreciate what you're trying to do as far as building community with the type of units and amenities provided for families in that missing middle that we all want to see more of, so thanks for that. Just regarding staff's comments about color and variation, I think I'm fine with the black and how it's treated internally. I think it's nice. I'm fine with that. I disagree with the balance between the rear yard or the side yard, the back of the building, and the internal. I don't think you need to push people into that space. People will go to that space anyway, and you need to give them an option with their private backyard as well. The internal courtyard, it is a busy space. There's a car-oriented zone. It's great, people playing there, etc. But in my own experience, having previously lived in a courtyard townhouse with young kids, there are points of conflicts with not everybody has kids, likes kids, or has kids anymore, and it was a surprise to me, and that does create tension sometimes. So you have to give them the option to go into their private rear yard as well. And I think right now with the black, it's not that inviting, so it doesn't have to be a lot. Splash of warmth through the ground plane or the door or something, just to make it more inviting. That's what I'd suggest. Otherwise, great project. Thanks. That's all I can say.
Thanks. I'm just going to say that I feel like it would be a little bit easier to see a little more connection to the context of the neighborhood in some of the diagrams and presentation that we've had. As we've talked about it in the past, and it really helps us wrap our head around what's happening in the neighborhood and what this building means to the neighborhood. And I know right now there's just single family homes, but we've kind of got to think of what future structures could be in the neighboring lots. And of course, one of the first questions was about the zoning. So I'm going to take it that each of the lots all the way along this Crescent are going to pretty much be built similar to this project here. What does that mean at the end of the day? Yet to be discussed, I guess. On the colors, I tend to support staff in the suggestion of the notes of maybe some differentiation between units. I feel in general in Squamish we're ending up with a lot of sort of larger buildings that look bulky, and I like to call them ferry boats. And it's happening a lot out there, so I personally like to encourage some different colors for each of the units so that it just breaks it up a little bit. And then one of my thoughts here was just maybe the end walls could be a lighter color, because then you've got something a little bit less bold to the street. And then also there was the comment about the back wall getting very hot, so that might be another good reason to have a lighter color on the end walls. Something to be explored. And then last but not least, the comment about the garbage trucks. And I would always like to say that efficiency and safety would trump a minor effect on aesthetics. I really think you could have a garbage room at the front of the property facing the street. It looks like the one you've designed at the back would look very presentable at the front, and you could push the whole building back, and then you've got a stagger, which is nice too. But and then also landscaping can kind of dress up, whatever garbage room sits at the front, so it's not too bad from the street. But I think it's worth it for the efficiency and the safety factors, especially if you're looking at several of these developments in a row all the way down the street. It would be a major benefit. And that might be a planning directive of some sort. So that's my comments.
May I ask
Anyone
a
else?
quick question?
Mm-hmm.
What step code is this being for energy?
Step code 3.
Okay, well, at this point, we would go to the recommendations. I'll read them out. Recommendation A is that the advisory design panel supports the project as presented and does not need to see this project return. B is that the advisory design panel supports the project in general and would like the applicant to work with staff to resolve the following recommendations. C is that the advisory design panel would like the applicant to resolve the following recommendations and return to present the revised project. And D is that the advisory design panel does not support the project as presented for the following reasons. Throw it out to the table as to
I'll move B.
which option. B, any discussion?
Yeah.
So,
I would just, staff have asked for comments about the cladding and things, and we've kind of given a pretty balanced
Mhm.
response.
Yeah.
So I feel that they could work with the applicant as opposed to us needing to see it back.
absolutely agree myself. Okay, so option B, and can someone, David? Okay, Carlos motioned it, David would second it. And all in favor? Against? There we go. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a very productive and constructive feedback, which is great. It's good. Should make the project better. And by the way, that fence wasn't supposed to be on there. It kind of got thrown on, and it will be just a very simple horizontal flat. And maybe pick up on that to break up the color of the natural as opposed to let it go gray. Just let it naturally look great.
Oh, yeah.
So I apologize for that.
And there's a nice fencing on the entry.
Yeah. So that's the idea, and then it goes to the.
So will that be sort of like?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's
That's
your consistency there. Something kept in there.
Okay, welcome back to Advisory Design Panel. Our next item for business here is DP 529-40809, the Crescent, and we'll hand over to the applicant and the planning staff.
Hi everyone, my name is Brian, Development and Subdivision Coordinator with Community Planning. Here today is DP 509-40809 Crescent. It's 13 townhome units. Staff are seeking ADP's comment on the site plan, the architectural design, the building materials and exterior finish, and the landscape plan. So I will keep this brief and pass it over to the architects.
Thanks. Thank you all for your time. I'm Patrick Warren, and this is Emily Glasky. We're both here representing Crescent Architect's office. So we're the architects for the project. And we'll take you through, we'll try to be brief and just take you through the design for the project. Okay, so the project is situated in the University Heights Phase 2 area. So the area outlined in black is the single family, or is the entirety of Phase 2. In the bottom right-hand corner, outlined in red, on the drawing is our subject development. That's where the townhouses are. To the right of that, you can see those are two 4-story multifamily buildings. And across the street from our site is another site designated for multifamily as well. And up in the top right-hand corner is Crescent University. So we are actually also the architects of 51 homes in the University Heights single-family area. And that's a kind of the whole neighborhood is meant to be in association with, being close to Quest University and in the mountainous environment. It's meant to be a sort of forward-looking, modern neighborhood for for families, and and just draw on that character. So for that part. Because of the location in between the single-family houses and the multifamily houses, we think that the relatively small scale of the townhouses is a really good building technology for this location. From the street, the townhouses are 2 stories. Because of the topography in the rear, they're 3 stories. So the streetscape is kind of improved by that topography. For the public driving by the development, the view is of only front doors and public gardens, and all of the garages and driving aisles are hidden in behind the units.
Okay, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about the site. The site is quite long and narrow and has significant topography. There's about 13 feet difference in grade between the front of the site on the north and the property line at the back at the south. So access is from the northwest corner of Huckleberry Road, directly opposite the lane. The townhouses are 2-story with a basement, and the buildings use the topography of the site with the front entrances facing onto the street, and the lower floor of the driveway and garage entrances from the back. So you can see on the section there, it deals with most of the topography. Townhouses are divided into 3 blocks, 4 units, 5 units, and 4 units for blocks A, B, and C, respectively, and that we feel that breaks down the scale of the development rather than having one long continuous block. The grading allows for a large level outdoor space at the north side of the buildings, which connects to all the townhouses. So rather than having park space off to one side, the public space is integrated into the development and visible from all the townhouses. The public space is separate from parking and traffic, and topography and landscaping provides a natural barrier to the street. All the townhouses are orientated so that the large decks and master bedrooms face towards the south, where obviously the sunlight is, and also where the most dramatic views are. So just moving on to the floor plans. The living spaces on the main floor is open plan. There's 3 bedrooms on the upper floor and a large garage on the lower floor, which can accommodate 2 cars, plus a lot of outdoor equipment, and also has pre-wiring for electric vehicles. The floor plans are designed to be open to the front and the back, with a visual connection to the distant views, as well as views to the immediate garden and shared open space. The homes are also filled with natural light, with significant glazing to both the front and the back. And we feel that while simple, the floor plans are designed to provide an appealing, connected, and flexible living space. So now, just moving on to the massing, form, and character. So far, you can see here that all the living spaces have that amazing view to the south, to the mountains, and decks looking out over that space as well. So this is a view from the looking on the roundabout. You can see the key in the top left-hand corner, which shows where the 3D views are taken. And you can see development split into 3 blocks of townhouse clusters rather than one large continuous building. And initially we showed 14 units in a 4-5-5 configuration, but reduced the number down to 13, primarily to just give a bit more breathing space to the blocks and provide more outdoor space around them.
And more privacy in between as well.
And more privacy.
Just because of the configuration, because they're one of the blocks is turned in towards the others, we needed a little more space in there to create the privacy.
So the unit plans are all identical to provide economy of construction and therefore to create homes that are actually affordable for young families. So it was important to the design team to minimize the repetition in that because of the repetition of the floor plans. So we deliberately introduced variety with the material palette and also with the forms. So you can see that the roof forms of blocks A and C are different from block A, from block B, from the center block. And with the limited palette of materials that we have, we've actually applied them in a different way to blocks A and C from block B. And we feel that by doing those two things with the material and the roof lines, we provide contrast and a visual break between the blocks. So it feels like more of a community of different houses rather than just one long monotonous development. So in keeping with the design aesthetic for the entire University House Phase 2 development, the roof lines are simple and bold, and the detailing is crisp and modern. Cladding is applied in simple shapes to reduce visual clutter of flashings and trims and to keep construction economical. And the sculptural modulation of the blocks gives a sense of distinct individuality to each unit within the blocks. The materials, we do have the materials floors. And the material guide is here as well.
It's relatively simple. Would you like to pass it around or shall we? Yeah.
Yes, please.
So materials are selected for durability, ease of maintenance, modern appearance, and blending with nature. We've used black around the upper floor modules, and it's selected to recede into the natural surroundings. And the colour scheme is contrast-based to emphasise the clarity of the forms, so that even in a low grey light and grey weather conditions, you still get a crisp, modern look.
And sorry, I just want to jump in. One thing about the materials palette, we're using a sample that is not concrete, but is meant to represent concrete because we didn't have a chunk of actual concrete to put on board. So that's what that square is meant to represent. Great. Okay. So the so the public outdoor space is located along the north side of the property, and so it provides separation from the driveway. So we felt that was safe, but also it provides a really good connection to every townhouse. It enhances the streetscape and provides a transition from the public street to the development. So you can see this is a walkway within the development. To the right-hand side is the public outdoor garden space, and to the left-hand side are the small individual gardens. They're separated, well, Julian from Considered gets to talk about this more, but it's separated by just low hedging, so it feels open, but you have that sense of going from the public street to the semi-public open space to the private garden and then into your unit. The configuration of the open space being wider at one end and narrower at the other provides the opportunity for social gathering, but also a variety of outdoor play activities because of the overall length of the space. So you can imagine, children running through here or playing frisbee or throwing a ball, but then also people gathering in the wider spaces, or if that's how I imagine it. And then from the shared public outdoor space, residents move through their private gardens, which are very open, into their homes, and the sequence of public to private spaces is intended to feel deliberate but also generous. The townhouses internally are designed to accommodate families with as much freedom and connection to nature as possible. So as mentioned, floor plans are open from front to back with private outdoor space at both ends of the home. Front gardens provide a transition to the interior, but also an opportunity to connect to the private garden. And then the rear deck is an extension of the indoor living space because it projects from the living space and frames the view to the mountains. For our office, it's always really important in projects where there is a distant view to somehow pull you back into your own space and actually connect to your to the local garden, so you don't feel like you're just looking at nature, but that you're a participant in nature and in the overall environment. Some of the end units, so there are 3 end units with larger garden spaces, and we'll just use the cursor there to highlight those. So by breaking the blocks up into 3, we're actually creating 6 corner units, which within a row of 13 townhouses actually provides, even though they have the same floor plan, provides actually quite a bit of variety. And then the 3 units have these really nice outdoor garden spaces as well. They all have the front garden, but then they influence get the kind of larger outdoor space. And yeah, I think that's what, that basically sums up our, you talked about the storage in the garage, which we also think is a really great amenity in such an outdoor-oriented community. And so we'll turn things over to Julian Patterson from Considered Design Landscape Architects.
Thanks, Patrick. So Patrick and Emily have covered most of the, a lot of the topics concerned with the kind of outdoor space, really. I'll talk a little bit about planting. Planting's all low maintenance. It's native and native adaptive. We've also got an area to the top right of the image there, which is designated as wildflower meadow. We think that's important in an area where you've got large areas of essentially mown grass. While any grass that's mown requires things to mow it, and that requires resources. So if you've got a wildflower meadow, your mowing regime is a lot less, but it also increases biodiversity by the very fact that it's native species that are inhabiting it. So for those areas kind of on the wings, that's what we very much see as being the kind of the less used areas, if you will, and then the kind of those 2 blobs in the middle are really the kind of areas of more formal lawn, which will be the kind of larger play spaces. Patrick and Emily talked at length there about the definition between the communal space and the private spaces. That's really enhanced by this idea of the low hedging. So we've got low evergreen hedging, no new hedging. The whole intent of that is that it provides that kind of barrier, if you will, without being kind of very defensive, so that neighbours can still talk to each other, and it feels very communal. It feels like you can have a conversation over the garden hedge, but it isn't kind of a very formal keep out kind of sign. So we were very much felt like this is really about the creation of the community up here, and I think the architecture and the landscape kind of hopefully speaks to that. One other thing just to note, everybody knows everybody in Squamish has a bike, and more often than not their bikes are worth more than their cars. So where we've got the bike parking spaces, we were very conscious that we wanted to put them in very visible places, so that if you do lock up a $10,000 mountain bike, you can see it, and everybody else can see it. So we were just kind of conscious that there's one at the entrance there, there's one right in the middle of the main kind of axial top of the stairs. I think I'll leave it there, if there's any questions. Thank you.
Anything else?
One thing we didn't mention was the garbage and recycling, and we have communal garbage and recycling actually just tucked in underneath this garden at the end of the blockade just here, so it's accessed off the driveway at the back.
Yeah, so just to clarify, that green area that Emily's pointing to there is at the main floor level, which is at the common garden level, and the driveway, of course, is the story below, and is where the garbage is accessed.
So it's a green roof, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thanks very much. Appreciate that. Questions? Okay, start, Brian?
Yeah. I don't have a lot of questions. I'll just keep it short. It was about landscape, and gone over a lot of it, and a lot of the areas are designated as informal spaces. I just wondered if you considered more program spaces, communal areas, playgrounds, etc.
There's actually a playground very close to the development, so we felt
where is that? The university?
Yeah, just go back up. I can't see a thing.
I think
It's
it's
terrible.
here.
Oh, yeah, through that connecting path. Yeah.
So we
Still a ways away, yeah.
it's about 5 minute walk. We actually felt like putting stuff in there that was over-programmed was kind of the wrong thing to do. We wanted to feel it. We wanted to make it as flexible as possible for as many people as possible. So I think a playground is a great thing to have, but it's only relative to the people using it. Whereas this, I think, having these large open areas allows for family picnics. It allows for communal gatherings. It allows for all sorts of things to happen on there. And I think that was kind of the real sort of thinking behind it. We wanted those spaces to feel as flexible as possible. So that's basically the reason why they're just a large communal green open areas. So almost like a kind of old school idea of a common.
Right, okay. That's my only question.
Just a question about grading. You had mentioned from one end to the other that there was I think you said 13-foot grade change.
Yep.
Is the pathway that is going in the front accessible? Is it less than 5%?
Yes, so this pathway that comes through here and then the pathway along the front is all sloped. So it's not, it's all within a reasonable slope. I think it's 1 in 20 is the maximum steepness of it. And that actually connects to the 2 accessible parking stalls as well. So that's all on a level and also connects into the street on a level.
And are you able to tie into existing grade on the PL, or are you having to incorporate any sort of wall?
We don't have any walls around the perimeter of the site at all. We have, we've naturally graded everywhere. So up here, there's quite a bit of grade change. So this is naturally graded just using slopes and using boulders. There's quite a lot of boulders on the site at the moment. Similarly down here, we have some sloping grades.
We planted basically everywhere you've got a kind of a slope. It's a relatively steep slope. There's nothing steeper than 1 in 3 anywhere.
Yeah.
They're all extensively planted to basically hold those slopes together.
And are you planning to repurpose the boulders that are there?
Yep.
Oh, nice. That was my other question. Color. I was just curious about if you had considered different color for the architecture and your approach to choosing colors.
We did, of course, we looked at different colors. And actually the first design model, the very first presentation kind of to the team, had different colors on the different blocks. It had the opposite effect than we expected. It actually made the whole thing look a bit muddy. We wanted it to be really crisp and clean. There's something about the crisp lines of the mountains and the sky. And I also always remember the first, Chris and I have been working together for 19 years, and one of the first things he explained to me was his idea of contrast in architecture. And he said, you look at these old buildings in the German hillsides, and they're this really, really dark green with the white background. He said it's got nothing to do with the fact that they're green, actually. It's the fact that in these dim days in the winter, they read as being really bright. So the idea with having a really contrast-based scheme was more about the brightness, kind of overly, it's a bit of a dim. So that was the thought behind it. And the using black, we had been looking at really dark gray as opposed to going with black, and we just felt that black was sharper, and also it looks quite beautiful in the flashing areas, but then the lighter materials are all kind of on the faces of the building. So it's just sort of a
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Just a question for Julian. Are where the common areas are, the shading, is it meant to be burned in there, or were you just?
No, it's really just the area that would be mown.
Oh, okay.
So that's
Okay.
kind of the lawn, if you will.
Gotcha. And then, so areas around that, would that all be wildflowers?
We haven't really kind of fully we were thinking more the wildflower would be more towards the edges, but it's really a proper management regime.
Yeah.
So, because I think it makes more sense on the east side if that whole area with the sloping is all
Right.
wildflower meadow, and then it kind of gradually fades out, if you will, as you
Right.
go more west. But I think it's really just it's you know, I would like to see those lighter shaded green areas kind of just mown less essentially,
Gotcha.
and then the wildflower meadow kind of is the
So there's a transition into
there's a
the
transition,
wild.
yeah.
Is it wildflowers all down there?
No,
here as
there's,
well?
there's actually, that's actually a fairly steep slope. We planted
Okay.
that with ferns all down that side.
Okay. And then that, the boulders, I was gonna
Yeah.
ask that too, that's just a bit of retention.
It's all retention, yeah.
It's steep right now.
Yeah.
And then this is all ferns or?
Yep, it's
along
ferns
the-
and ground covers that are tying the slope together essentially.
Nice. Okay, and you don't have wildflowers over here at all?
No,
This is
no, that's
of
more,
formal entry.
yeah, exactly, that's more the
Yeah.
kind of, the formal
Yeah.
kind of entry to the side of the gateway, if you will.
Yeah. Okay, that's good for me, thanks.
My questions, can you just tell me the front doors, these paneled doors, what color are they going to be? They're going to be a light gray or
Yeah, so, sorry, and I apologize they're not on the board. We actually thought they should be a darker shade of the gray to give some depth to it, but not black like the outline, so that was sort of our idea there.
And then, was there any consideration, because I know that there's 4 units at 0 step entrance, to grade it all so that they're graded to the front door of each of the units?
Yeah, it is a really good point. There are varying degrees of ease or lack of ease in that. So we have talked about it.
It's definitely possible, yeah.
Take another look at that.
Yeah. The reason I think was to kind of elevate the buildings to give like a little sense of more privacy to some of them, but yeah, that was the one.
Thank you very much. Question with regard to environmental, are you going to design it to step 3?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. And window materials are vinyl or aluminum?
We anticipate at this point fiberglass, but a final decision hasn't been.
The sample of the gray, is that the window?
The sample of the gray is the color only.
But not
It's not from the manufacturer.
So we have fiberglass.
We're anticipating fiberglass, but a final decision.
And I do see a section on the other direction, only one direction. Do you have, have you used, take advantage of the heights inside the rooms, or you want flat?
There's, yeah, the attic space is not.
So it's an attic?
Correct.
Have you considered using that?
We did, yeah, the conversation came up for basically economy of construction. We with the same team, have gone through having vaulted ceilings on another project, and it became kind of overly cumbersome for the effect, and because it was for the bedrooms, we didn't want to sort of spend the money in that location as opposed to...
So the roof line is only for the elevation, just for the lookup?
Yeah, basically, yeah.
And did you consider the issue of the snow and the flat? I saw that
we
you have...
did, and we heard that come up in the
right.
previous one as well. And I thought that's interesting because exactly what was pointed out, what you pointed out, is was our conversation back in the office.
Right.
But extending the membranes up high enough to determine basically the standing snow load level and taking the impermeable torch-on membranes up to that.
You can do that in the cricket part, but not in the flat part at the ends. That really causes problems. That doesn't have much of a slope anyway. You have 2 flat sections at each side, but you take care of it. I'm sure it's a detail that can be sorted out. Yeah. It's not going to kill the project, but anyway. What is the material of the soffits, this area? And the window sills, exterior window sills, outdoor?
It's Metal flashing on the
So the same
windows.
roof goes to the fascia board and goes underneath everywhere, all the way?
No, it would be the hardy boards. So to achieve the black finish, we're using a combination of standing seam metal on the roof and then wrapping down the walls. And then on the fascia would be the black hardy boards to the
So
same color.
hardy boards
And
go
then
in
on
the
the soffit would be
flashing
the
and
same.
then upstand seam?
The fascia would be the hardy, and then the soffit would also be the hardy.
Hardy. And the seal?
The window sills would be
Because
metal and would be the same color as the window frames.
I see. So the seal and the fascia board, two different materials, and the window seal?
Yeah, so you can see the windows are always separated
Sort of see.
from the black, so you can maybe see from the images in front of you better. But the windows are contained within the whites or within the wood, so therefore the sill becomes part of the look of the window rather than tying into the black material.
And kitchens. You don't have much of a counter or wall cabinets or anything. It's just like a very small units for the apartment. So, you have a fridge on one side. Is that true? Or
Yeah,
two
so
fridges?
fridge on one side and pantry on the other side with the
And
range.
no counter.
And there's an
food
island. There's an island right opposite it.
And you don't have dishwasher?
There would be a dishwasher.
No room for it.
Oh yeah, the
Well,
pantry.
so I mean, the interior design process hasn't been done. So we have to go through all of the kitchen planning. We have a pretty extensive interior design process that we'll go through.
Okay, well, that's my question. Thank you.
Most of my questions have been asked. Just checking that corner, would the garbage truck be able to make that corner? It's pretty sharp.
Yeah, we have actually sent our plans through to the garbage collection company, and they've approved them. So Carly's good.
And just in terms of outdoor lighting, how is that going to be lit?
We think around the front, in the buildings themselves, there'll be lights in the soffits at the entrances, and also the same at the garage entrances at the back. And then within the landscape, I think we would do something quite low level, minimum, just to
Like
give
kind
enough
of low
lighting.
level follow-up type light.
Yeah.
It basically kind of shines on the paths.
I was going to say those pathways between the three sections, are they well lit?
Yeah, that's the whole intention, so there'll be follow-up lighting.
And I noticed, sorry if you go back to that, just on that corner there's large sort of white space there. How well is that protected from graffiti?
Oh, the wall.
Yeah.
This wall? It's the white hardy panels, so I mean it can easily be painted over for one thing.
Sorry, I missed the question.
Graffiti.
Just
graffiti.
resistant, protecting it.
Yeah, I mean, so that's it's a good question. I mean, it's a hardy, so it's durable. It can be cleaned, and then if it can't be, it needs to be painted over. But it doesn't have any special resistance.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi. The visitor parking is all to the rear. Is there any street parking on the Crescent?
There's not street parking on that portion of the Crescent. It's fairly, there's quite a bit of grade to the Crescent there. And
yeah, this climbs up.
and because it's on the curve, I mean, we weren't involved in the civil aspect of it, but there's not parking.
So if you visit a friend there, you go to park at the back and then walk up the steps and go around the front.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, well, we like to think that the neighbor or your friend would let you in through the garage. Really hope so.
Especially if you have an expensive bike.
Yeah.
Is there a planning question maybe? Is there any requirement for covered outdoor amenity space?
Not on this type of development.
And then for the applicant, was there any consideration to making beautiful south-facing decks actually covered?
No.
That's honest answer.
It's fine. I like the suggestion, but we actually thought that having the light come into the living space was really important. So we have a little bit of cover for rain protection, but we thought about it more as you know, opening that whole thing out, if it's warm enough that you can have your doors open, but it's also raining, then you would be inside, or you would go outside when it's dry and sunny. But what we find is that if we don't have enough width for both the covered deck to one side, for example, and then open glazing, then it becomes quite dim inside. So that's sort of the idea was a light priority.
Okay. And then I guess the same question to the porch. The porch seems to be partially covered, but the two steps are uncovered. Any consideration there for an extension?
There's about 3 foot overhang at the moment from the door cover on top of it, but yeah, it doesn't cover the steps themselves. That would have to be quite a big overhang to do that.
Yeah, at some point in the design process, they did get eliminated, and I can't totally remember the whole process. I think it was just that there were additional kind of small pieces that we were going to take out, both for economy and simplicity. We really wanted the buildings to be simple to execute as well, so that they could be modern without looking kind of junky. You know, like some of the complicated buildings you get flashings everywhere, and you get sort of bits and pieces everywhere, and we were trying to really pare them down in a way that had a lot of like level lines and simplicity.
Okay. And then last question is similar to the garbage truck. Has a traffic impact assessment been done for a fire truck to get in the back there, or does the fire truck come from the Crescent?
Fire access is from the front, so we did send it to the fire department also, and the proximity of the doors to the street works for them. Yeah, and we did.
We have a new fire hydrant.
Yeah, we had to add a fire hydrant to the site.
Yeah, I was wondering how you got that. Okay, thanks.
Thank you for the presentation. Just 2 quick questions for you. Is it cedar for the vertical wood elements that you're proposing?
It's a fantastic question. So it will either be cedar that's stained and then UV coated, or it will be a wood look product. I like to specify that it would be a realistic, high quality looking wood look product, but it hasn't been selected within the whole team.
And have you looked into like an Akoya product or something similar that is a bit more resilient?
I think that's it. I mean, it's a good comment. We're using that product on other projects. It's a matter of cost. I mean, if it works within the budget on the project, we would certainly consider it.
Okay. And then I just see a comment in here in the staff report about traffic calming measures for the street. And maybe you could just speak to that if you did consider that, or if that's something that's still under consideration.
We did. We thought about things like sleeping policemen and all that type of stuff. Our feeling was ultimately that I think traffic is actually going to move pretty slowly in that back area, just because of the nature of the kink in the road there. And I think, you know, I don't really see that there is going to be a huge issue with vehicles moving around too quickly like that. So that's kind of where we left it, really. We thought about, you know, maybe doing things with paint on the asphalt surface. You know, that's still something that we're still thinking about, to make it kind of more as a pedestrian orientated type space as opposed to, you know, more dominated by vehicles. But I think really it's, you know, the kind of roadway, if you will. I can see those garages being used quite a lot, and I've lived in a bunch of developments like this in Squamish, and you know, especially kind of those south-facing developments. In the summertime, I'm sure you know, people just have their garage doors open, and then, you know, it's almost kind of like that's really where the social activity happens. There's a lot of, you know, going in and out of other people's garages, and bikes are out, and, you know, all that type of stuff. So I think it will actually end up being a fairly pedestrian-orientated space.
Great.
Thanks. I'm a little bit curious about the wildflower you brought up, how they brought it up, because I like the idea, but I'm just explain for me, is this a scenario where people can walk through it, or is it?
Yeah. So it changes throughout the year. It's not something that always looks the same.
So the whole idea is that you're basically increasing biodiversity by using native species that would grow here in a mix. It's kind of like a matrix, so you plant this kind of matrix essentially of wildflower seed essentially. And then it essentially regenerates itself, and it's cut down twice a year, so you go through and it gets mown, start off again.
Okay.
So there's a management aspect to it, but the whole idea is essentially you're increasing biodiversity, but you're also decreasing maintenance. Large areas of lawn, as I was saying, they require a lot of maintenance to actually kind of, to make them usable and look good. You've got to be mowing those things every couple of weeks, and that's it's a lot of resource ultimately over the lifetime of the project. So the idea behind the wildflower meadow is that A, it's more visually interesting. B, it's better for the animals. C, not as much maintenance involved as gasoline-driven mowers.
I'm just curious if there's any point where, with people walking through it, it might get unruly, or might outgrow unruly. But then, of course, you're saying you could trim it.
Yeah.
And how does that speak to seasonal? Sort of get into winter, does it turn into a mission mess?
No. That's when it's trimmed back.
Okay.
So it's purely a management thing. So as we go down the road of kind of refining what this is in terms of the actual species that are in there, then we'll figure out the actual management regime to it, and that's how it goes forward as a managed resource.
I'll be very curious to see how it works out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me too.
Okay. Anyone else? Any other questions around it? Okay. So we'll move to comments with Graham.
Sure. Thanks. No major comments. Staff seems to be satisfied. Most of the guidelines seem to be met. So I'll just say it's great that the client is diversifying a bit up here and doing some townhouses as opposed to just single family. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
Overall, I think it's a really successful project. I really appreciate your rationale for the color palette. I'm curious what it would look like if there was a variety of color, but I think the result would be exactly what you already have. But yeah, I think it's a really nice approach. I think the landscape approach overall is really lovely. Wildflowers as well are always a really great incorporation. I appreciate that the views are really special, but I think it would be beneficial to have street trees. I think it would offer a really nice character for the people in that space and a separation from the Crescent. But overall, really interesting project. Thank you for your presentation.
I agree with everything that the two of you have said. I think it's a great project. I really like the look of the roof lines and the articulation between the groups, and it has a very interesting, different kind of look and feel to it that I really appreciate. Yeah, and I'm also really interested to see how that color works in the sort of grayer days and your efforts to bring a light in. That sounds really good. And I think it's an interesting project as well because of the grade change. And I like how you've dealt with that and how you have the cars in the back. And I think that the approach to the landscape is simple and elegant. I like the use of the wildflowers and the natural boulders on site. I think that's going to reduce the maintenance and just all of the mowing and irrigation that you would otherwise need. So I think that's great. And I think it's a good project. It's a good one.
Yeah, I really like this project as well. I like the simplicity. I'm glad to hear that the front doors are going to be slightly darker gray because in the bedrooms
they wash out a bit.
It just wash out a bit just to make it a bit more prominent. I would encourage you to try and grade so there's zero step at each entrance, and then in which case, if you could put a pocket door on the powder room, then those units would be visible, which would be fantastic. And in that same token, because then there'll just be one set of stairs to go up, if you want aging in place, is just to have some contrast between, floors and cabinets, just so that there's some visual cues for people losing vision as they get older. And, otherwise I think it's a great project. Oh, and just to pay attention that the accessible parking is actually going to be as flat as possible. Doesn't get lost to the subcontractor. Very weird. Thanks very much. It's great.
Thanks.
Yeah, I sort of like the project. I think it's a great project. I just caution you with the roof lines and make sure that the drainage, otherwise it eventually becomes a pot.
Yes,
Yep.
thank you, yeah, definitely.
Thank you. Great to see this project in that university area. And I like that you've broken it up into sections, so it's not just one big slab. And the use of color is very elegant. So it adds that kind of up look to a family, for young families. I echo the comment about street trees. That would very much add to the aesthetic, as well as hopefully giving at least a little bit of cover to the back patio, given our climate. Today being the exception. But yeah, so that people can enjoy that back deck. It is beautiful. So, but other than that, it's a very good project. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, really like the project, really like the material palettes, nice and restrained, kind of high quality materials there, and a good mix. I personally feel that the form has maybe overcome the function a little bit, and you've not really created a usable rear deck at all. Those are elevated, south-facing, no cover, and all of those, personally, I think all of those units are going to overheat, and there's no shade, so I couldn't use the deck in the summer, and I couldn't use the deck every other day it's raining. So just some consideration to something out there, and I would just encourage that. And then, yeah, I'll be curious to see what affordable for young families is. But I really appreciate.
We actually we wanted to actually substitute because affordable is it's such a loaded word, but it's also sort of like affordable for who. And so I think we sort of meant to use the word attainable a bit more. Like it could be a sort of starter home. But
yeah. And notwithstanding my comments about the form following function, I think I really appreciate when we can see simplicity in the construction that can actually save people money, as opposed to just superfluous decoration everywhere that serves no function, thermal bridges, and cost money. So it's a really good looking project.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, I'll echo some of the comments. It's very crisp. I really like it. It's a very good use of the terrain. Probably don't have to tell you this, but maybe something to consider. Drainage can be an issue when you build into the slope like that, and so going with like an ICF for that wall that's adjacent to the slope can really help with moisture. I know some houses in my neighborhood have got persistent moisture problems because they're just cast in place concrete with their detailing wasn't that great. I agree, David, that south face needs to have an overhang. I personally live in a house with a 5-foot overhang on that southern face, and my house overheats in the summer. I think even if you have an overhang, you're going to need to consider roller shades or something in that area, because if it's step 3 and it meets your targets, it's going to be a challenge. I'd encourage you to consider an advisory lane for that road. If you're not familiar with that, it's basically a 3.5 meter travel lane in the middle of the road with a 1.5 meter lane on either side that has like a pedestrian painted on it. And as if to say, when you're traveling on the road, be in the center of it, so there's still like sidewalk space, and it gives priority to pedestrians and cyclists, and then it's a bit of line paint, and it's cheap and acts as a traffic calming measure. And yeah, I just encourage you, please use wood instead of hardy looking wood if you can. And if it's cedar, then look at some of the new treatments they have and coatings they can use, because that might help you with longevity and get your 25-year warranty or whatever you need. That's my comment.
Yeah, I would agree with everyone. It's very, I'd say, curious was the first word in my head in a good way. It's really playful, and it's one of those projects where it's like you look at similar projects that are perhaps a little bit more difficult, and this one you go, this looks like it would be a really nice place to live. You know, there's a lot of functionality to it, and I imagine because you've got a bit of slope to play with there, that really helps, and it's harder for people when they're on the floodplain, but this is great. I think I'm just going to rest on the comments that everyone else has made and stop there. We will go to recommendation at this point. I won't read through them again because I just did earlier, but I would suggest for B. Is anyone interested in A?
I would put that forward.
Anyone else?
Could I ask a question? If we did A, would staff still have the ability to ask about shading or, you know, some treatment for that rear? Or is it A just a clear shot? No more comments?
I actually tend to agree with you. That's a relatively important one. I think either way, it's probably a point well taken, but...
I mean, you know, whether it's A or B, we still have the ability to discuss everything we heard and other issues with the applicant. So it doesn't mean that nothing's going to change just because it's A.
I lean towards B just because there are some comments.
Okay.
I guess.
Shall we vote on B? That the advisory design panel supports the project as presented and would like the applicant to work with staff to resolve the following recommendations.
Just jump in here.
Sure.
I made a mistake in this recommendation, and it should say supports the project in general, and would like, that's the only difference, and I've highlighted that to Curly already, but just to make sure.
Please don't be B. Please don't be B.
In general, instead of as presented?
Yes.
Okay.
Is that for E?
I've got it in the notes.
For E.
We have it as that in here.
Yeah.
Oh.
No, thank you.
So Sarah has moved.
Somebody overruled you.
Someone fix it for me, sorry.
Sarah has moved B, and someone second?
I'll second that.
Okay, Carlos will second.
Sarah and Bill? Yeah.
All in favor? Against? There we go. Thank you very much. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. I love the beginning with the neighborhood context. Everything that's all surrounding it, and it just started it so much better. Advisory design panel, we're back and we're making a motion from Sarah to adjourn. Seconded? David?
See you guys in a couple weeks.